You always thought your childhood was a straight road with a few potholes, nothing a careful driver couldn't avoid. Until the afternoon your grandmother asked you to sit at her kitchen table and told you where the asphalt really began. The kitchen smelled like cinnamon and hot dust, the way it does on late Sundays when the oven remembers old recipes better than you do. Sunlight leaned in through the lace curtain and turned the steam from the kettle into a slow, holy column. She placed a tin on the table, the dented one with painted cherries that held everything important and nothing sweet. Her fingers, knotted like roots, circled the lid but didn't lift it yet. You watched the way light caught on her wedding band and thought, as you sometimes do, about the weight of small circles and the promises they trap. "I need to say something before memory decides for me," she said, and her voice carried the soft rasp of pages turning. You'd heard that tone before at the ends of stories, just before the lesson, never at the beginning. The kettle clicked itself sensible. She poured tea with the precision of ceremony. 2 cups, no sugar. The spoon ringing the porcelain. Like a tiny bell, you felt more than heard. A fly traced a lazy oval by the window, and you followed it, as if a distraction could be permission not to hear what was coming. It came anyway, in the silence after cup settled, in the way her mouth arranged itself around a truth. "I have kept something from you," she said, and the sentence rearranged the furniture in your chest. She had kept recipes and stories and winter scarves. She had kept the family together with safety pins and superstition. She had kept you. You remembered the lullaby she sang when you were small, the one about a boat that never reached shore but never sank, and how she hummed it even when there was no child to soothe. You had always assumed it was about bravery. You had not considered it might be about guilt. She lifted the lid. Inside the tin, a small stack of photographs with curled edges, a hospital bracelet the color of old milk, a lock of hair that had faded from brown to the memory of brown, 2 letters folded in quarters and smoothed to obedience. You recognized the hand in the photographs before you recognized the faces, the flourish on the Y, the way the dates tucked into corners, your grandmother's notes, always in pencil, as if erasable could protect anything from permanence. The top photograph showed a girl holding a baby, her smile too large for the room, her hair tied back with a ribbon that matched nothing she wore. The girl looked familiar in the way relatives look familiar when your mind needs an answer. "That's your mother?" you said, because that was the name the family used for the young woman who had gone away. Your grandmother shook her head, slowly, the way a pendulum says no to time. "That's your sister," she whispered, and the floor under your chair suggested you choose whether to sit on it or let it carry you anyway. The word sister warmed the room and cooled it. It changed the picture frame and the person inside it. You laughed, not because anything was funny, but because your body needed a sound that wasn't a sob. She flinched at the laugh as if sound could bruise. She touched the hospital bracelet with a tenderness that made your throat tighten. "I told you your mother died when you were very small," she said. "It was easier than saying I changed names because the town would not forgive me." The T went astringent on your tongue. You saw your grandmother as the age she had been when that decision stood up and looked her in the face. Younger than you are now. Older than any mercy she had for herself. "You were born on a Wednesday," she continued, as if the shape of the day could make the truth roll smoother. The sky rained like it had been saving up for you. She held you and then she didn't. I held you, and then I could not put you down. You remembered the calendar in the hallway that always opened to May no matter the year, and how she said May was the month with the best light. Your birthday is in May. You had filed that away as sentiment. Perhaps it had been penance. The second photograph showed a man standing on the edge of a porch, shoulders squared the way good men are taught, and complicated men imitate. His eyes, when you brought the picture closer, held a version of your own. He is... You started and she finished because she had been waiting years to spend that word. Your father. Not the one you were told to fear. Not the one you avoided at the grocery store. The one we hid from, because hiding felt like protecting once. Your mouth made a shape around the idea of father that felt like a mispronunciation. You saw the man's hand on the railing, the carefulness in his posture, the suggestion of flight held in place by duty. "We said he left," she said. "We said he couldn't be trusted with winter or a child or his own words. We said it because saying anything else would force us to admit we were not strong enough to fight what other people believed. The letters waited. She placed one in front of you, the crease revealing how many times it had been opened and refolded. The paper smelled like church and mildew. Your name appeared in the greeting like a stranger. You unfolded the letter with fingers you did not recognize as yours. A man's handwriting, steady, patient. A few letters exaggerated as if to prove something about attention. He wrote about starlings, how they move like one body, and how he had never learned to move with anyone until you were born. He wrote about promises postponed for the sake of someone else's sleep. He wrote about sending for you when the town forgot its favorite gossip, about building a room that would be yours before it knew your size. He wrote your grandmother's name with respect, like a title. He asked her to forgive him for the shape of the mistake that sent him away that winter. A mistake named pride, a mistake named hunger for a different job, a mistake that in that place and time counted as rebellion. He did not write anger. He wrote weather reports, her cough getting better, the frost gone from the northern windows, the first bloom on the tree that didn't bloom last year. He wrote like a man building a bridge out of nouns. At the bottom, a small drawing of a sailboat, the shape of your lullaby. You touched it with your fingertip, as if graphite could remember skin. Your grandmother watched your face, ready to steady you if you tipped. He asked me to bring you, she said. And I said no because my no had more friends than his yes. The pastor, the women at the store, the old rules spoken in new voices. You looked around the kitchen as if it could explain itself. The clock above the sink had ticked through every lie and every truth, faithfully. The blue bowl held apples like a bowl in any home. The stove had burned for all of you without distinction. Why did you tell me she died? You asked, and you were not sure whether you were asking for the sake of your sister or for the sake of yourself. She turned the ring on her finger once, twice, as if tuning, because I needed you to belong to a story that people would not try to take away, she said. If you belonged to grief, they would step back. If you belonged to shame, they would pull. The sound that left you then was not elegant. It was the sound a room makes when a window breaks, and the pressure finally equalizes. She did not apologize again. She let the air find its level. The second letter was addressed to your sister, written years later, never mailed. Your grandmother slid it across the table as if it were hot. You read the first line and recognize the shape of regret, practiced daily until it became cursive. Your sister had left her own note, tucked behind the hospital bracelet. 3 sentences on lined paper, wobbling with the impatience of a young hand. I'm not ready, it said. Please tell them I'll be good when I know how. You pressed the paper to your chest, as if it could lower your heartbeat. She came back, your grandmother said, and the floor's boards whispered every time someone had crossed them with hope. She stood on the porch and asked for you, and I made her wash her hands and her face and her name before she could touch you. She could not manage all 3. You tried to count the times in your childhood when women cried in the doorway without being invited in. You had assumed they were salespeople with poor timing. Perhaps they were versions of your story, turned away to keep your life neat. I told her to make a life and come back when it could hold you, your grandmother said. She sent letters addressed to me when she could manage to believe that. Some years she could not. I put the letters in the tin and told myself I was preserving your peace. You said the words that taste like a handful of coins. You lied. She nodded as if agreeing with the weather. I lied to keep you from a storm I did not trust you to survive. I did not consider that I might be the storm. The tea was cold. Your palms were damp. Your body felt like a house the morning after a party. Confetti in the corners. A bruise on the wall where the picture fell. The smell of something sweet you didn't eat. You saw your childhood as a hallway where certain doors had been painted shut. You had learned to admire the paint. You had learned to stand in the hall. You had not known how many rooms belonged to you. He died, she said quietly, and the air became respectful the way it becomes in churches where the grief is old and has learned to sit without fidgeting. Before the town could forget, before I could forgive. She did not say of what. She did not need to. You looked at the porch man again, the way his shoulders kept him upright and betrayed him at the same time. You tried to imagine his voice saying your name, and the sound refused to break through the years. I would do it differently now, your grandmother said. And the sentence did what apologies sometimes cannot. It confessed a crime to a future that might have no court. But back then the world was smaller and the rules were larger. Then she did something you had never seen her do. She reached for your hand, not to guide you through a street or to get you across a curb, but because her hand needed your hand. You let her fingers braid with yours and felt how warm regret can be. "If you wish to hate me for a while, I will make tea and let you," she said. "If you wish to leave, I will pack you sandwiches. If you wish to find her, I will give you what I have." You realized you were the only one who could decide what kind of story you were in now. A tragedy with a noble martyr, a comedy with too many coincidences, a mystery that solved itself by admitting it had never been a mystery. Just a series of adults who chose the easy version of difficult. Outside, a neighbor's radio played a song from the year you learned to ride a bike. The summer your knees always looked like maps. You had thought memory was a place. Today taught you memory is also an editor. You folded the letters, placed them back in the tin, and asked for names that could become addresses. Your grandmother nodded, stood on her careful legs, and went to retrieve a small book from the drawer that knows everything. The road you thought you'd traveled straight began to reveal its curves. Honest at last. She brought a thin address book with a cracked spine and opened it to a page kept alive with tape. Few names, many attempts at names. A P.O. box in a town that smelled like rain in your mind. "Sometimes the letters came back," she said. "Sometimes they didn't. I took the not coming back as a favor, and now I see it was also a theft." She traced the ink with her fingertip as if warmth could make the letters deliver themselves. You copied the address. With care you usually reserve for important rituals. Your name at the top of the page looked like a contract your hand had negotiated with your heart. "She is not a villain," your grandmother said. "She is not a saint. She is a woman who made a small decision that became a large one, and then found herself living inside it, like a house with doors she could not open anymore." You wanted to ask what she looked like now, how her laugh had aged, whether she still tied her hair with ribbons that did not match anything. You wanted to ask how many times your grandmother had stood at the sink and practiced telling you this truth, and decided to wash the same plate again instead. The clock sighed past an hour. Light shifted on the table and reintroduced the scratches you had drawn with your fork when you were 7 and told the peas they were not invited to your mouth. The table had hosted every version of you. "He wrote one more time," your grandmother said, and her voice thinned at the edges. "After I did not answer after winter left. He wrote that he would wait on the porch every evening for a month. The letter arrived on a Friday. By Monday, waiting had ended. You did not ask how. Some endings have short corridors. You nodded and let the room learn the shape of a man who had believed in evenings. Your grandmother lifted the lock of hair, lighter now than truth, and placed it in your palm. "From your first haircut," she said. "Saved in a jar that once held jam, because it felt right to keep sweetness involved." You closed your fingers around it, guilty for how small your hand made it. You felt suddenly possessive of your own beginnings, even the ones disguised by other people's courage. You asked when you could start looking. She said now, as if the word had been waiting in her mouth since the day you learned it. She promised addresses, names, a map drawn from memory and humility. "I will not ask to go with you," she added, and you heard the effort in her generosity. "But if you want me there, I will walk as far as these legs remember youth." The afternoon thinned and let evening practice. You stood, your chair singing the small scrape that means a decision has stood up. She watched your hands gather the tin, the scrap paper, your keys. In the doorway, she reached for your sleeve like she used to when your shoelaces were lies. "Whatever truth you find," she said, "bring back the part that feeds you. Leave the rest by the road. We have left enough offerings to shame." You stepped onto the porch where summers had taught your skin the patience of heat. The boards remembered your weight. The air did the simple kindness of being breathable. On the walk to your car, the neighborhood introduced itself again. The blue house trying too hard, the hedge that always felt like a fence, the mailbox with the dent that taught your bicycle its first regret. You logged the familiar as a way to brace for the next unfamiliar. The address you wrote looked like a path drawn across the day. You put it on the passenger seat like a quiet passenger. The engine turned with the sigh of machines that have seen a lot and pretend it is ordinary. Before you pulled out, you looked back at the window where your grandmother stood behind the lace, small and sturdy. A lighthouse no one had taught her to build. The light sometimes late, but real when it arrived. As you drove, the town rearranged its memories for you. The schoolyard offered a swing you could not fit anymore. The corner store remembered your favorite candy and the courage it gave you to walk home in the dark. You paused at a red light where a stranger waited in the next lane, fingers drumming a wheel like a heart. You felt a strange tenderness toward every person on the road, each of you hauling your own confession to whatever table would bear it. The post office in the small town smelled like glue and expectation. You held your letter like a fragile engine and asked for a stamp that could carry a life across an absence. The clerk slid you a sheet of lighthouses because the universe sometimes tells the same joke twice. You stuck one above your name and felt ridiculous for the comfort it offered. You mailed the letter not as a ceremony, but as a chore, the way people mail taxes or apologies. You stood a moment longer listening for the sound of paper learning distance. It did not arrive. It never does. You trust the machinery you cannot see. Back in the car, you let your body remember how to inhale without an audience. You thought of your grandmother's hands circling the tin, a planet holding its moons, her gravity choosing you again and again in the only language she was taught. Driving home, you did not rewrite your childhood in a single pass. You made small edits in pencil. The birthday where the cake had too much frosting turned into a day where love had too much fear. The night the storm knocked out the lights became the night she held a candle and told you ghost stories so you wouldn't be scared of real ones. At a stop sign, you realized that nothing about the past had changed, and yet everything about it had become available to you in a new way. Access is a mercy disguised as a door with a stubborn hinge. You parked and sat in the quiet car, listening to it cool, a series of ticks that sounded like agreement. In your pocket, the lock of hair warmed to your skin like a small animal lulled to trust. Inside, your grandmother had set out dinner without asking whether you would be hungry. Soup that respected onions, bread with a burn you both ignored. The table waited the way tables wait, without judgment. With room, you ate, because sometimes eating is an argument with despair and sometimes it's a truce. She didn't ask about the letter and you didn't offer. You talked about the neighbor's tomato plant that believed it was a tree. After dishes, she handed you a small key. For the chest in the attic, she said. I put everything I couldn't look at in there. I think it's time the house knows the names of its ghosts. The attic ladder complained but held. The air carried cedar, paper, and a hitch of summer. You pulled the chest into light and the dust applauded. The lock yielded, a click that sounded like a word learning itself. Inside, more photographs. A baptismal gown too small for any truth you could carry now. A ribbon the color of not belonging. A letter your grandmother had written to your sister and never sent. Stubbornly stamped but never addressed. You sat cross-legged on the floorboards that had heard everyone's secrets and began to read words written in a hand that had taught you to count, to stitch, to hold a knife with courage. Your name appeared in the letter as if you were a country. I raised you to be safe, she had written, long ago to a girl who might never read it. I did not know how to raise you to be free. The sentence fluttered in the heat and refused to land. You closed the chest and pressed your palm to the lid, a gesture that belonged to prayer or to promises. You came back down with the key warm in your pocket, and your breath arranged into something like patience. Your grandmother had fallen asleep on the sofa, her mouth slightly open, the face she wore when no one needed her to be wise, softening into the girl who once stood in a doorway and decided which way to send a child. You tucked a blanket around her, the way she tucked courage around you. You stood a moment and listened to the house live, the tick of the cooling oven, the hum of a refrigerator faithful to its small devotions, the whisper of a curtain learning night. In your room, you laid the lock of hair on the dresser and watched it catch the last light. You had thought your story was a straight road. Now it was a river with bends that were older than your boat. You lay down and asked your body to model sleep without guaranteeing it. When it finally came, It came like a hand to your forehead, cool and certain, and pulled you across to a place where the kitchen was a boat, and the table was an oar, and your grandmother was singing a song that did not promise shore, only weather you could survive. In the morning, you would go to the attic again. You would sift and sort. You would sharpen the map your grandmother started in pencil. For now you let the new truth settle where the old truths had slept, making room, making sense, making a shape you might one day call home. Morning arrives with a polite gray light, the kind that asks permission to reveal what it touches. You wake with your tongue tasting like old paper and peppermint, the residue of truth and attempts at comfort. The house is quieter than usual, the silence companionable, like two people eating breakfast in a library. You climb to the attic before coffee, because some doors should be opened while your hands are still honest. Dust waltzes in the slant of light, each mote a tiny confession, each beam a ribbon untying itself from yesterday. You open the chest again and lay the photographs in a careful procession, a pilgrimage of faces toward a question. One picture is a porch again, another a kitchen with a calendar turned to a June that may never have happened. Your sister's ribbon appears in 3 frames, stubbornly blue, defiantly unmatched, like an exclamation in a polite paragraph. You hold the ribbon, and it holds nothing back. It smells faintly of soap and an old argument. Your grandmother's voice finds you from the stairwell, the sound carrying a plate and a plea without saying either. "Coffee," she says, and you hear the apology and the generosity. The day prepared as if it can be made kinder. Downstairs, the kettle hums its prayer. She sets the chipped blue mug in front of you like a blessing returned. "I dreamed I forgot your name," she says, hands wrapped around her own cup, warming the ache out of her knuckles. "You didn't," you answer, and the kindness surprises you like a stranger paying your bus fare. The address sits on the table between you like a passport and a warning, small and audacious. "I'll drive," you say, tasting the courage of simple verbs, trusting the road the way a child trusts a hand. She nods, as if this plan has been waiting at the back door. With its shoes on, you leave the dishes to their patient drying and carry the tin as if it has a heartbeat. The car accepts, the two of you like a boat, allows passengers who don't agree on the destination. Your grandmother adjusts the seat and turns the vent away from her throat, habit smoothed by years of small storms. The town drifts past, reluctant, each corner a lesson you learned without knowing there was a teacher. Fields appear, a slow wash of green and gold, the horizon practicing an apology for being late. You watch telephone lines rise and dip like a pulse, carrying other people's emergencies. Across anonymous distances, your grandmother hums the boat, lullaby under her breath, and you try not to hear it as an indictment. At a diner that smells like pancake batter and ambition, you stop to let the road catch up. The waitress calls you both Hon and sets a sugar caddy that looks like it remembers your childhood. Your grandmother orders toast as if it's an oath. You ask for eggs because protein feels like a promise. A man at the counter stares at the wall clock as though it owes him years. When the check comes, your grandmother palms the bills with the speed of a magician, making regret disappear. "Let me," you say, not because of money, but because of balance. And she lets you. Outside, the air tastes like sun-warmed asphalt and rumor. The car door sighs with civilized resignation. The post office is smaller than you pictured, a square of seriousness in a town that believes in birthdays. Inside, the air holds the perfume of envelopes and elastic bands, the careful smell of departures. P.O. Box 131, you tell the clerk, your voice measured, as if speaking to a skittish animal. The clerk looks at you over a pair of glasses that could correct history, if worn correctly. "Closed years ago," he says, and the word years drops like a stone in a shallow pond. Your grandmother leans forward, her posture a negotiation. "Any forwarding? Any note?" The clerk's fingers hover over a ledger that seems older than his hands. He rifles, a ritual of paper and patience. "Last notation," he murmurs, and you feel your pulse climb into your ears for a better view. He writes a name on a scrap of paper, an address that feels like a road clearing its throat. "She volunteered at the church kitchen for a while," he adds, almost conspiratorial. "Didn't talk much. Smiled like it hurt." Your grandmother stares at the paper as if it might bite or bless. Both outcomes appear possible. Back in the car, the address sits in the console like a compass that knows more than you. You drive, the landscape shifting from fields to neighborhoods. Houses wearing porches like intentions. A wind chime announces your turn before the GPS can work up the nerve. The building is a modest stack of lives, each balcony practicing a small version of hope. On the second floor, a doormat declares, "Welcome," with a font that tries too hard and means it anyway. You raise your hand and lower it twice, the choreography of courage rehearsed. Then you knock. The pause is long enough for your heart to tell you stories. The latch clicks like a secret clearing its throat. She opens the door and your face rearranges itself to make room for recognition that doesn't yet have language. Her hair is brown, threaded with sparrow gray. Her eyes are a problem you've solved before in a mirror. The ribbon survives as a memory. Today, her hair is clipped back with a practical barrette. A rebellion grown up, you, she says. And the word is a question. A blessing. A tally. Me, you answer. Because sometimes pronouns are the bravest nouns. Your grandmother stands a half step behind you. Smaller than her legend. Larger than her fear. Your sister's gaze touches your grandmother like a hand offered over water. You came. Late, your grandmother says. And the honesty arrives with no apology attached. Your sister steps aside, the door widening, a corridor into a room that smells like coffee and folded laundry. Inside, plants reach for light without asking permission. A mug cools on the table, blue and chipped like a callback. You sit, the chair performing its simple vocation, and your hands discover a tremor reserved for new truths. Your sister pours coffee that tastes like cautious generosity. Her fingers tremble once and make peace with it. I wrote, she says, and the sentence rustles like a dress kept too long in a closet. I kept, your grandmother answers, and the sentence places a tin on an invisible table between all of you. Silence behaves politely for a moment, then breaks the ice with small talk about the weather's old tricks. You take the lock of hair from your pocket and set it on the table like a witness. Your sister touches it with the back of her fingertip, as if heat could scorch a memory. I wasn't ready, she says, and the child in her voice walks into the room and sits on her lap. I wasn't brave, your grandmother says, and the woman in her voice finally stops pretending to be steel. You feel the room tilt toward fairness, not as a verdict, but as a desire. Your sister tells you about the year she left, the job that was a promise until it wasn't, the room that was a bed and a door and a decision. She tells you about the first time she came back, hands clean, face clean, name unclean, and the threshold that measured without mercy. I stood on the porch and counted the boards so I wouldn't count what I'd lost, she says. Your grandmother's hands knot into each other, a sailor tying and untying the same rope. Trying to remember rescue, you let your breath be a metronome, slow and even, marking time so the story can find its pace. She tells you about your father, the good coat he saved for chances, the way he learned to build shelves, as if making space could be penance. She tells you he carved your name into the underside of a table so he wouldn't have to explain hope to anyone else. He waited a month, she says, then another, because hope doesn't own a calendar. Your grandmother closes her eyes and opens them slower, as if the world is heavy but still worth the lift. I should have let you in, she says to your sister, to the past, to the part of herself that stood guard against grace. I should have stayed, your sister says to the door, to the town that watched her leave, to the sky that wasn't watching. You say nothing for a moment because sometimes language is a fence, and sometimes it is a gate, and you are deciding. Then you say, I'm here, and the sentence is a road with no potholes, at least for this mile. Your sister smiles the kind of smile people wear at funerals when someone tells a story that resurrects the loved one long enough to laugh. Do you hate me? She asks, the question wearing second-hand shoes. I don't know how yet, you answer. And it is not cruelty. It is a weather report. Do you forgive me? Your grandmother asks your sister, the apology finally taking the shape of a request. I forgive us, your sister says, and the plural lands like a quilt over 3 chairs. The coffee cools into honesty. You drink it anyway because you choose to be hydrated for whatever comes. Your sister brings out her own tin, not cherries but daisies, dented in different places, containing a passport photo, a receipt, a library card that still smells like old spines. She hands you a photograph of a table's underside, your name cut into it, the letters patient and sure in their small darkness. The boat lullaby lifts in your throat. Uninvited, and you realize it doesn't promise shore. It promises help rowing. Come back with us, you say, surprising yourself with the invitation, surprising the fear that wants everything solved separately. Your sister looks at her plants, at the blue mug, at the rug that learned her feet. She nods. In the car, she sits in the back as if testing the distance between past and present with a tape measure. Your grandmother adjusts the rearview mirror to include her, then looks away quickly, ashamed of how much she wants to keep looking. The town receives you like rain that can't decide whether to be a storm. The porch boards prepare themselves. Inside, the house notices the new heartbeat and makes room in small ways. A draft quiets. The clock ticks kinder. Your sister pauses at the threshold like someone asking to borrow time. Your grandmother steps aside as if offering hers. The kitchen fills itself with the smell of broth and resolve. You slice bread and don't count the pieces. At the table, your grandmother places the tin between the salt and the truth. Your sister sets hers beside it, an unplanned duet. Letters are opened in no particular order because life rarely sorts itself chronologically. Some words sting and then soften. Some soften and then sting. You learn to hold both without dropping either. I kept this for you, your grandmother says, and it finally means what it should. I wrote this for me, your sister admits, and it becomes something she can share without breaking. You read aloud the sailboat lines, the weather reports, the sentences that built bridges no one crossed in time. When you reach the part about waiting, you stop. The room waits with you, honoring the man who made evenings into prayers. Your grandmother pulls out the baptismal gown, white turned quiet ivory, and your sister touches the hem with the reverence of someone meeting her own past. We can be better ancestors, you say, and the sentence is both a vow and a blueprint. Your grandmother nods, wet-eyed, the kind of tears that don't demand pity. Only partnership. After dinner, you light the lamp your grandmother favors, its shade casting a honey oval on the table where your history breathed. The three of you talk about ordinary things, trash day, the neighbor's lemon tree, whether the new bakery overcharges for sincerity, until ordinary feels like a miracle. Later, you walk your sister through the house your childhood lived in, introducing rooms to the person they almost knew. In your room, the lock of hair rests on the dresser like a comma instead of a period. Your sister laughs softly, a sound shaped like relief. You keep beginnings where you can see them. Sometimes they're the only things that tell the truth without trying, you say, and the night agrees. When sleep leans toward the house again, you make up beds with sheets that smell like sun and stored summers. Your sister lies awake a while, counting the slow hums, refrigerator, streetlight, breath, like sheep that learned to be machines. Your grandmother sits at the edge of her own bed, hands folded around gratitude like it might fly unless held. In the morning, the kitchen invents pancakes that taste like amends. The syrup takes its time, unhurried, faithful. You find the attic key and place it in your sister's palm. A passing of a small torch that can light large rooms. Together you climb, 3 generations of knees negotiating the ladder like a fragile treaty. The chest waits. No longer a vault, now a cabinet. You open it and breathe its archive air without flinching. Your sister chooses a photograph of the porch, tracing the rail where your father's knuckles learned endurance. Let's build a small shelf under the table, she says suddenly, and the idea feels like a psalm. Downstairs, you kneel with a board and a drill, the room holding its breath for the soft whirring of repair. The shelf fits like a decision finally accepted. You slide the tins onto it side by side. Reachable. No more attics, your grandmother says, and the line lands like a law everyone wants. You stand, back crackling like applause, and the 3 of you listen to the quiet begin again. Outside, the day puts on its best blue and pretends it always meant to. A breeze tests the lace curtain and approves. You step onto the porch where waiting once lived and find it renovated into welcoming. Your sister leans on the railing, not like a departure, but like a person learning the weight of staying. Your grandmother hums the boat song at the doorway, and this time it sounds like rowing in time, not rowing alone. You look at the road that used to be straight and see it smile. All curves and truth, honest as weather. We can visit the church kitchen, your sister says, and your grandmother's eyes say yes twice. We can write our own weather reports, you answer, and send them even when the forecast hurts. The house behind you is the same house, and it isn't. The difference is not in the walls, but in the keys. You press your palm to the doorframe, a benediction you didn't know you could offer. A neighbor waves, curious in a kind way. You wave back like a person who's learned to return. Down the steps, you feel the boards remember the lightness of your feet when you were small, and accept the weight you carry now. You breathe, the long kind. The kind that understands lungs are libraries, and you've just added a wing somewhere. A clock decides not to be your enemy anymore. It ticks like a friend who loves punctual miracles. You stand between the beginning and whatever comes next, and realize the boat was never about reaching shore. It was about learning to name the currents, to love the hands that row with you, and to forgive the river for being a river. Your grandmother's confession didn't change the past. It changed your passport to it, the stamp that lets you visit without getting lost. You tuck the map into your pocket, the one drawn in pencil, smudged with grief and butter, and feel it soften to your shape. You say, not aloud, but with your whole body, I am not a secret, and the air believes you. The road waits, not straight, not cruel, eager for your footsteps the way a porch once was for evenings. You take the first step, then the next, carrying hair and letters and names, lighter than guilt, heavier than denial. And the day, which began polite, grows brave with you. Its light stronger, its shade kinder, as if the world finally learned your name and intends to use it right.